Okay, so now we're just going to start with a few words from Councillor Tom Hayes, just giving Oxford City Council's perspective on local energy systems. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you. I should start by saying that I'm Deputy Leader of the Council, as Yvonne will be sympathising with. The Deputy Leader of the political group is an entirely different role, and I don't want to be stealing that role from them. It's great to be here. We're sliding into the cocoon, the warm embrace of Christmas, a period of real rest. So it's particularly exciting to see just how eager we all still are to imagine the changes that need to happen, not just next year in 2021, but over the rest of the decade, particularly as these changes have to be revolutionary, and we're already closing off an exhausting and disordering year. It's timely to be here today. We have to be, because the rest of that decade that I was just talking about has to be the most transformational that it can possibly be to meet very tight targets and deadlines, and we'll need to carry every single day to its limits. We have to be restless. There has to be a radical shift in technology to protect our planet and we who call it home. There has to be a radical shift in how we think about technology and how we use it. And to my mind, there must be a further yet more radical shift, and that's in our society's attitudes towards change itself. How do we make rapid and revolutionary change, but also how do we work with citizens to sustain it by becoming better at handling change? And I think we've all seen at the back end of this year that society hasn't always been able to withstand such change. We need to build in that resilience. We'll be talking today through this webinar about putting in place some of the infrastructure to achieve an energy system that will cope with the expected increase in demand from the electrification of transport, cooling and heating. But we also do need to carry that parallel conversation on about the cultural infrastructure that must be put in place to ensure that all people can embrace such an energy system. And local councils really are the key here. It's great to have so many local council representatives here on the call to understand that and be a part of that journey. Government at local level can be a partner to the introduction of change through our involvement in projects like Project Leo, as my city council is. We can bring our expertise, our experience, our passion, our commitment. But we can also uniquely work with our citizens to help them manage and respond to the cultural changes that we're all going through. Project Leo can help to create energy citizens, but local councils can help in the first place to create citizens and to uphold that definition and understanding of citizenship in the first place. And the City Council does that not just by focusing on the here and the now. We do it by taking part in time travel. We mentally skip over to 2030 and we ask questions like, what world will we live in? What transport will we use? What will the roads of the future look like? Will we even be using the roads? Where will we work, live and relax? How will we communicate? I've got ideas about these, so do my council. And one of our big assumptions is that Oxford will be home to and have contributed to the zero carbon energy system that will underpin all of our futures and help to answer all of those questions. We know in Oxford and at the City Council that we need to address our climate emergency. The City Council has declared a climate emergency unanimously. We have gone forward with a Citizens' Assembly, the first by a UK city, to ensure that we meet that emergency equitably and effectively by listening to all viewpoints and backgrounds in the city on climate issues. As a consequence of that and subsequent listening exercises like our Youth Climate Summit held just this month, we're refining and redeveloping our strategy to help bring about a zero carbon Oxford. We're listening and learning, we're asking questions of our public so that we can better support them to manage change, but also shape it more than it shapes them. We know that we're working to tight deadlines to achieve a net zero carbon UK. It's easier to set targets than achieve them, although let me tell you, it's not that easy to set targets locally. Oxford is in the process of developing our own zero carbon date for the city, working with partners and seeking to set up a zero carbon Oxford summit and partnership. But to set our new targets, we know our commitments can no longer focus only on the energy provided by large coal or gas powered stations located many miles from where energy is needed. Huge amounts of new renewable electricity generation must be connected to the grid, even to meet current needs. By 2050, the energy system will also need to cope with the expected increase in demand from the electrification of transport, heating and cooling. Integrating local renewable energy into the electricity network is challenging. The physical network infrastructure, associated business models and energy markets are designed for centralized large power stations not multiple and local low carbon sources. And that's where Project Leo comes in. That's why Project Leo is such a very welcome £40 million project, conducting real world trials to understand the role that local energy can play in accelerating the transition to a zero carbon energy system. By building an evidence base of the social, technological, commercial, regulatory and policy conditions required for more sustainable and equitable local energy systems, my strong hope is that Project Leo will show the benefits of a flexible energy system, just as the Council has been learning by reaching out to citizens and communities. So the ethos of learning is deep within this webinar and it's deep within Project Leo as a whole. The project gives Oxfordshire an opportunity to reimagine our local electricity grid in this innovative way, but to also recognise that people as well as technology are key to the success of a zero carbon energy system. Project Leo is building the capacity of our communities to engage with flexible energy infrastructure, one based on a smart local energy system. And I think excitingly for me, Leo also recognises an important fact. We don't yet have all the answers to the problems that we face. Project Leo is clear and importantly recognises that. It's a hypothesis being tested. The hypothesis being that an efficient zero carbon energy system supplying all the energy needs of society from local renewable electricity sources will need to be balanced at the local level. It's a project which is emblematic of Oxford itself. We're such a knowledge-rich city with so much information and expertise based here that we're all working together to find the answers to the questions I was posing before about the kind of 2030 we'll live in, the kind of answers to the questions that we're putting as part of Project Leo. And so I want to close just by thanking all those people on the call here who have spent some of their day to tune in as we're sliding towards Christmas and that much needed rest, to better understand Project Leo, to understand its place in our zero carbon energy system, and to keep on asking questions. And in asking questions, I'm reminded of that quote by Maya Angelou: be the best that you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. Project Leo will help us to know better, but then it's up to councils, other areas of government to do better once we know better. And I'm really excited to be here on behalf of the City Council and to say that as involved as we are in Project Leo, we're also really excited to be involved in coming up with the implementation of the solutions and the answers. We're living in a moment which already feels like an era. We may not want to think about the eternal inevitability and possibilities of change, particularly at Christmas, but we're here. And in the new year, when we all return from a restful break, I hope we return to a period of restlessness. I hope that all the people in the webinar today can relax over the new year after enjoying the webinar today, but I hope that they come back to work with Project Leo, our councils and our citizens as restlessly as possible so that we can build that zero carbon Oxford. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Yvonne Constance here speaking for about the County Council's involvement with the Leo project. I remember attending the launch of this project, and I'm delighted to be here today, not only to talk about how the County Council is involved with it, deeply embedded with it actually, and a very significant partner, but also how much progress you've made since that first launch meeting. At County, we've done more than acknowledge the climate emergency. We have brought together, published and declared our climate action framework, we call it, the Climate Action Programme, which does set out how OCC will make the best use of local partnerships and its strategic influence to enable a net zero carbon Oxfordshire. We have set for the County Council itself a target to be net zero by 2030. That doubles our previous target, so it's a very ambitious plan. And we aim to influence the delivery of a net zero Oxfordshire by 2050. Project Leo is one of the signature projects in this programme as a key building block in building our own Oxfordshire's energy strategy to reduce the county-wide carbon emissions by 2050. And it's an ambitious step on the road to net zero, which is currently a strategy owned by Cllr, County, the City, and the districts are all signatories. We recognise the importance of LEO as a project to delivering smart growth within Oxfordshire, which positions Oxfordshire at the forefront of innovation for clean technologies within the Oxford-Cambridge arc, contributing to the ambition for clean growth, smart energy that has been set out for the Oxford-Cambridge Prospectus, which was published in October this year. As a partner in LEO, OCC is taking part in the technical trials, but our main focus is to develop an energy mapping and insights tool to support energy systems and the planning for use in LEO, but it will also support our own strategic planning. This work will contribute to spatial planning for smart energy and to realizing our ambitions for net zero, both coming out for public consultation next year, both our own plan and the Oxfordshire strategic and the LTCP, which is our next transport plan, emphasizing other forms of connectivity, not just road or rail transport. The new data commissioned by OCC on renewable energy potential is already being drawn on for the Oxfordshire Plan 2050. Meeting this target calls for about 5 times more solar power in the county to meet existing demand and the new demand from our housing and employment ambitions, and to meet the electrification of transport and heating and cooling. We share the ambition that Tom has set out for Oxford City, and our particular role will be in producing project trials to assess how energy use might be managed to reduce pressure on the network during periods of high demand. In developing this new spatial energy insight tool in collaboration with Oxford Brookes University, we will support energy systems planning. This will be of use to LEO, but also form part of the evidence base to our own strategic planning in Oxfordshire Plan 2050 and the delivery of our own energy strategy. We are going to be working with LEO on an integrated land use map, which has been created by our energy insights and GIS teams and launched to project partners in October. It's the first phase of this project. The map drawn together into a single space over 40 layers of data held by the County Council or publicly available will give an accessible overview of land use, including environmental and landscape designations, agricultural grade, flood risk areas, planned housing and employment growth, and the energy assets in Oxfordshire. New data commissioned from Energeo Limited identifies areas across the whole county which may be suitable for installation of additional renewables, solar and wind, and estimates the potential generation capacity for each additional suitable area. The Oxfordshire Plan team are already making use of this data to consider areas for possible strategic scale renewable generation and for potential co-location with areas likely to see increasing energy demand. Further data sets will identify opportunities for household renewable generation, that is rooftop solar and or ground source heat sources, and help identify neighbourhood and community areas where energy efficiency programs may be best targeted. These data sets will help us plan for the scale up of renewable generation and improvements in energy efficiency, which is highlighted in the Oxfordshire Energy Strategy. The Energy Insights team is also commissioning EDF research and development to develop a model to embed the smart local energy system into all new developments. The first phase of this work produced an energy plan to support policy development in the Salt Cross Area Action Plan, and the next phase will further develop the model underpinning the energy plan to explore the impacts on the wider electricity network. This work will support Ancham's Smart and Fair Neighbourhood project in the development of a local area strategy plan. That detail is important in understanding quite how practical and embedded and deeply involved Oxfordshire's officers and its data is in developing the LEO project. The county-wide data, together with further new data sets on household renewable generation, will be an important part of developing the model to enable new housing development and to balance local energy demand and generation to achieve a net zero system from the outset. We do not lack ambition, we do not lack expertise, we are contributing fully to this programme.
Thank you. Right, afternoon everybody. My name is Malcolm McCulloch and I head up the Energy and Power Group in the University of Oxford, but more importantly I am deeply involved in Project Leo. And thank you to both Tom and Yvonne for those kind words and those really good insights and their long-term support for Leo. So today I just want to concentrate on thinking about why Project Leo and what are the broad perspectives rather than diving into too much of the detail at this stage. Please follow up with us at a later date to see how you can get involved and how we can support you in looking at dealing with this challenging of how do we move to a zero carbon energy system. It's worthwhile starting to think about what's everybody kind of jokingly says is that the main purpose of a power system is to keep the lights on, and that's really true. In one meeting I heard of a really good comment which says that there is a very easy way to go to a zero carbon energy system. You just turn all the lights off and everything else turns off. And that's unfortunately is true, but it might not be the desired outcome. So when looking at a transition, we need to think about three key important issues. One is about environmental sustainability, how are we treating the planet, energy security, in other words, are we keeping the lights on, are we providing energy at the right time to the right people, and energy equity, which is about saying how can we ensure that everybody has appropriate access to the energy system. So I just want to take you back a few years and think about how did we do this in the past and what are the changes, and to think about what are the implications of those changes going to be. So let's start off with a famous site within Oxfordshire, which is Didcot Power Station, when it was being built many years ago. And you can see that there's a large pile of coal, which is basically our energy storage, and then we burnt lots of coal and we produced lots of electricity, which powered this country. And if we look at the broader context of what did the energy system look like at that stage, what we saw is that we basically had our power generation. These were in centralized places where there was lots of coal, and then you basically moved them via a distribution system and transmission system and to the end users. And the end users then paid the retailers money, which then distributed back to the generators and to the distributors. And in a UK context, the distribution was basically in two parts. We got a transmission system run by National Grid, and then we got the electrical distribution system, which is in our particular neck of the woods is Southern Electric, and the retailers were in those days the big six. So that's what the traditional system looks like, and most people think of it looking in that way. And the challenge has been is that we've recognized that our atmosphere is actually not that thick at all, and the amount of carbon that we're producing from those power stations was actually making a significant effect to the planet, such that it was starting to affect the long-term climate, and we need to make a change. So we basically moved from a carbon producing system and we're moving it to a renewable energy system. And at one level you can kind of think, okay, that doesn't seem like a huge transition, and if we look at what the system picture looks like, all I've done is basically change the distribution, the generation source from centralized power stations, coal-fired power stations, to more distributed stations. And then, so the first issue we're going to have to deal with is that they're not just in one isolate or in a few small isolated places, but rather they're taking a lot more area, and therefore we need to be planning for where they go for. But alongside that, we've also recognizing as we decarbonize the system is that we're going to get a whole lot more loads onto the system. Not only are we increasing the amount of housing that we have in the system, which is increasing the demand for electricity within the country, but also we're moving to air source heat pumps to create warmth, and for charging infrastructure for electric vehicles and mobility. So if we take this into a local context, what does that mean within Oxfordshire? Well, we know that we're planning for growth, and they're going to be, on the order of 100,000 new homes are planned for 2030. We also have electric vehicles coming on and a significant amount of electrification of heat. And that means that an additional annual demand of 870 gigawatt hours is required just for Oxfordshire. However, alongside that, not only is the demand increasing, but also because we're aiming for net zero, it means that we need to increase significantly the amount of generation that we require. And we need something in the order between 5 and 6 fold increase in the amount of generation. So that's in the order of about 2,000 gigawatts hours or 2,000 gigawatts of extra generation that's required in the system. So one of the things, as Yvonne already mentioned, is that as part of LEO is we've been looking at to say, okay, how does this impact the map of the land within Oxfordshire? So we've been looking at Inga and her team have been producing a fantastic tool which allows us to not only identify where the growth of the houses are, and also what the energy requirements are going to look like, but also to be able to understand in a lot more detail of exactly which houses potentially could be used for heat pumps, and so we can just really start to understand where the loads may be, as well as looking at where is there potential for solar generation, making sure that we don't impact any SSIs or any other particular sensitive areas. And so this tool can start to be used in our decision process as we build up a strategy for the county and for the counties and the various local authorities associated with the county. But not only that, we can also go to a much more micro level where we can start to look at what's actually happening at the requirements in the thermal using aerial thermal imaging. We can start to understand exactly how much thermal energy is going into various homes, and where there are opportunities for individual owners of buildings or homeowners to actually make a significant change to their particular building infrastructure so as to decrease the requirements for energy going forward. So building together this fantastic tool not only builds together aerial imaging, but also takes in the energy performance certificates, otherwise known as EPCs, looks at what the potential opportunities are for those particular ones. We look at the building properties and topologies in the external wall area, and together with Brookes University, they're putting together a opportunity to actually understand what the cost would be to be able to upgrade those particular buildings, to improve their thermal performance, and from that to understand what both the energy and the carbon savings will be going long term. So this is now starting to become a tool that is useful to local people. So if we saw, so as we have seen, is that the one aspect has been that we moving to renewable energy structure, renewable energy system, is that we are having to go to a much more distributed system. We've got to look at what the implication is over space. But we've also got to think and a little bit more concerned about what happens with time. So if you have a look here, this is an example of what the power consumption will be over time, which is the orange, blue, and green curves is what the demand is going to look like. And if you looked within Oxfordshire, the black curve would be the total low carbon generation that mainly coming from solar. And we can see there's a clear mismatch between them, and also there's substantial peaks that are going to be coming, and so therefore we find there's going to be an imbalance in the system. And not only are we seeing there's a substantial increase in the amount of generation system and the amount of demand in the system, that means that our transmission system that was connecting the two is going to be a lot more stressed. And the biggest worry that we have is to ensure that we don't have that coming forward, which is basically overloading of our energy infrastructure, causing fires, and those then causing long-term delays and power outages, which is the last thing we're looking for. And this brings us to the second element of our trilemma, which is energy security. How do we ensure that we can move to an environmentally friendly system, but ensuring that the lights stay on at the same time? And that means we need to come back to our diagram and think a little bit more to say that, remember, this is what we said, that we're going to be increasing our demand and increasing the generation. but also because of that temporal imbalance in the system, we actually have to add a whole new element into the system, which is balancing services, which allows us to smooth out those peaks and troughs in generation and in load, so that we can more appropriately use the system, our existing system, without having to dig up all the roads and put in a lot more underground cabling and spending vast amount of money in upgrading all our transformers throughout the system. So what's interesting is previously we were basically moving energy through space. Now we need to think of moving energy through both space and time. And that's a fundamental shift in the way we think about our system. But if you have a look at what do we mean by that battery, is it necessarily a battery or what else could it be? And in fact, what we find is that there are a whole lot of new opportunities with the new loads coming in. If you look at, for instance, electric vehicles, they have a primary service which is providing transport, but actually for most activities for most of the year, they'd only be using something like 10 to 15% of the energy in that vehicle, and 85% of the energy is just sitting on the forecourt. So we could look to say, okay, how could those assets now provide additional energy balancing services to the system? And also, as we move to electric vehicles, we find that we've actually improving the efficiency of the system. But actually, if we now start to think not just of electric vehicles, but electric buses, we can also improve the congestion in the system, as well as improving the overall impact in terms of on the environment. So both electric vehicles and heat pumps, basically exploiting thermal storage, can basically balance out, which means they can arbitrage the time that energy is generated, and these different appliances can then consume the energy and provide the service required at a time later. And so this allows us to have a much more flexible energy system, which is going to be absolutely key as we go forward. So one of the major changes is that if you looked previously, we had a retailer. Now we're going to have a look at the energy service trading, because not only are we moving energy, moving value from the generator to the load, but actually the loads themselves have an opportunity to provide additional value both to the generation system and to the distribution system by being able to manage those flows a lot better. So we are now looking to a marketplace where instead of us consumers just being able to purchase energy, we can now actually look to forward and collaborating with colleagues to be able to provide services and provide services back to the system, and to be able to extract value from that system. But we're not just a local system, we're also part of a wider energy system, so we have to play our role correctly within, not only within Oxfordshire, but we've also got to play a role within the wider energy system. And that's so when we balance not only locally, we also got to be able to provide services to the national infrastructure. So what this does is it shows us that we can actually start to provide an energy system that both keeps the light on, and so therefore is secure and is environmental friendly. But what about the third element of the trilemma, which is equity? And so within Project Cllr, we're also looking to say, how can we ensure there's an equitable distribution of value and capabilities beyond just the normal providers of energy services and the usual suspects. And so we have a whole smart and fair neighbourhood development system, which is basically looking to say, how can we increase the capabilities of various exemplars of neighbourhoods and of communities, so that we can ensure that they have they can provide value to the system and be able to benefit in an equitable manner given the resources they have to hand. So one of the interesting questions is often posed of us is, what do we mean by fair? And for us, we define it as an equitable access to affordable clean energy services, and we quite like this cartoon, which kind of explains the difference between equality and equity. So equality is where everybody's given exactly the same service, whether they need it or not, or whether it's appropriate to them, as shown in the top layer of the bicycles. Whereas equity says actually we're now designing an energy service that is appropriate to each of the different types of communities and the different people within those communities, so that the system is not just fit for the rich, but is fit for every type of person. And to define such an equitable system, it means that we cannot work on our own. We need to be working with those communities to understand what they also perceive as to be an equitable system. So the question is, how do we actually ensure fairness within the system? And so the low carbon hub, together the universities, have developed some really good principles to say, okay, these are some of the absolutely key issues that we need to be bringing into account when we're actually dealing with it. One of the most important ones is to ensure that one's working collaboratively, so that not only do we understand what the opportunities for people are, but we also understand what their requirements and their real requirements are. And hence collaborative design is a very good tool to enable us to do that. But we're also doing things like making sure that there's inclusive participation, that people understand what they are getting involved with, and that there's truly informed consent, that we are respectful with people. But also we're recognizing that as we continue, we will learn and do things better. So what we're finding is that, to say, as we work with our various communities, we'll be having a continuous improvement as we provide better services. So an example with Hill, this is a way of understanding what the particular scope of the boundary is, and then working with the community, we've understood what has already been done within the Roseville community, and there's a whole lot of initiatives that have happened up there in terms of not just energy systems, but in terms of local sustainability, food, transport, community culture, zero waste, zero carbon living, and all sorts of different activities. And then working with the community, we've understood what are the better things that we can actually take forward and how those link together, and basically how we can use synergy to maximize a holistic benefit to the whole community. And we've done that in a way where we're working with the community so that they can understand what the benefits are, and they can actually therefore in the way they can interact with that future energy system. As already mentioned by Yvonne, is that we've also been looking at how do we actually plan for a local community, and particularly we started with there's a garden village development working within Anchem, and there's an active community group called Green Tea. And so what's been happening is that the LEO team, together with the council, with the local authorities and with the local communities, have been putting together a plan, not only just for the local garden village of what that needs to be and how it can benefit the local, not just the local inhabitants, but how it can play well with the existing local population. But also we've been looking what is the impact on the wider developments within Anchem, and how that we have an equitable use of the energy system going forward, especially with the increased generation possibilities around Anchem. A slightly different view is we've been looking at the low carbon hub has been working with Hook Norton, which is a new development. And again, you can see working collaboratively with the development to understand what are the values they want to achieve. And excitingly, how can they actually start to create their own little microgrid so they can actually start to share resources, so to share energy resources for the benefit of the whole community. And this is a really exciting development that we are looking to take forward. Looking at more more city-based opportunities is that working with the low carbon, with the Osney Lock Hydro team, is to say how can we look at a generation resource that's city-based along the river. How can we ensure that the local residents can actually create maximum value from that? And so we're looking to work within Osney Island to see how we can include car charging infrastructure, but also providing information to people to say, okay, when is the best times to be able to use the energy so that you can maximize the resource that's sitting on your doorstep. This is Rose Hill. Again, this is just again showing that basically we can see the number of different assets that we have in that are between within Rose Hill, and being able to see how they can start to work together as a community to be able to maximize the benefit of those assets within that community. So coming to conclusion, basically what we're trying to say is that what LEO is trying to do is to build up the understanding of what is an environmentally friendly and a secure and an equitable system, energy system actually looks like. And it's what's particularly exciting, it's actually not just a theoretical system, it's actually a real system, and it is grounded in the place of Oxfordshire. And the second thing we're trying to do is building the capability of all of us, because each one of us, both in our roles at work, but also as a roles as a citizen of Oxfordshire, we all need to become active participants in this great transition as we move forward. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.